Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. All right, let's do this. Guys, welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. It's your host, yours truly, John Abbas here, and I'm going to do something a little different today. I have a solo episode planned for you, and today I'm going to talk about podcasting. I'm going to talk about my one-year journey, and the reason I want to talk about this is because if you've ever thought about starting a podcast, if you've ever considered it, if you have a passion, something you'd love to talk about, you'd love to network with other people and something that you have an interest in, podcasting might be the way to go. And I'm going to talk about the benefits, how to do it, my journey a little bit so that you can decide if creating content or starting a podcast is something for you. It's not as hard as you think. There's a lot of moving parts, but to get started, it's actually really simple. So me personally, I just turned 38 years old. My birthday, September 18th. Happy birthday to me. But I started my podcast a year ago, and it's something that I wanted to do for myself for my 37th birthday. I wanted to try something different, try something new, and I loved listening to podcasts, especially just really great entrepreneurial podcasts. I was spending more and more time driving, listening to them. And so, at 37, I decided to do something different. I was like, you know what? I want to start a podcast. And I started doing a little bit of research. And, I got more and more and more excited. And so for my 37th birthday, that's what I decided to do. And so, the thing is knowing what I know now 1 year later, almost 50 episodes later, I recommend that if you have any kind of message, if you like people, if you enjoy interviewing people, if you want to network, if you want to build an audience, I think starting a podcast is the single greatest thing that you can do, and it's one of the cheapest things that you could do to go ahead and get started. Had I known, and I mean this, had I known what I know now, I would have started a podcast literally 10 years ago. And so I just want to give all of you listening some encouragement, some perspective in case you get off of listening to this podcast and you want to go do your own. Now, here's the thing. The first thing I want to cover is just how I got started. I'm not going to give you every single step here. This is a high level. But if you're interested or you have questions that I don't cover in this podcast, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I always respond on Instagram at Mentor Nation Podcast. So when I got started, I am an entrepreneur, and I knew that I wanted to serve entrepreneurs. I've been broke as an entrepreneur. I've had a lot of success as an entrepreneur. I've lost everything as an entrepreneur. I've started over many, many times. I'm 38. I've been an entrepreneur full time since I was 23 years old, and I've had a crazy roller coaster. And so I personally know what it's like at every single journey, from making $1 million in a year to losing absolutely everything and being almost homeless, crying with kids. And so I knew that I wanted to serve entrepreneurs. So the first thing was just the idea. I wanted to serve entrepreneurs and every step of their journey, but there's a lot of other people with podcasts doing that. And so the idea that I finally came up with is, I've attended a lot of events in my lifetime, and I found that the most inspired that I've ever been is attending events, listening to speakers give their keynote speech. And when you think about it, if you look at an entrepreneur, their keynote speech, it's usually their best content. Why? Because they're paid a lot of money, they're talking to a lot of people, and they do not have a lot of time. So they have to figure out, how do I deliver crazy amount of value in 30, 45 minutes? Because if they're going to pay me 25, 30, 50, $100,000 for a half hour, an hour of my time, I better over deliver. So I've learned that that's where people tend to do their most preparation. And so I had not heard a podcast yet that the goal was to take the value of a keynote speech and deliver it to people through an interview. And so that was my big idea. And so the next thing was I had to name my podcast. This, believe it or not, took forever. Like it took the longest amount of time. I thought of like 50 names and I ended up settling on the Speeding Up Success Show. And believe it or not, I recorded 5 episodes. Speeding Up Success Show had the artwork, everything made. And then I realized that it wasn't specific enough. If I was going to try to rank on Google or any of the search engines, I had a mentor that told me, he's like, hey man, you need to change your title a little bit. It would be beneficial for you so that you could rank. And so I started thinking about things that I wanted to like own the key word, something specific. And so after tons and tons of thinking, I finally decided on the Mentor Nation podcast. And that's the name of the podcast today. So I had the idea, I thought of the name. And so my next thing is I had to think about like, who do I want to serve? And that's called creating a customer avatar, because it doesn't matter if you create a product, you start a business. Like I own a preschool and I know crystal clear who my customers are, who I want to serve. Parents with young children. That's my bread and butter. And so any business, any media, the first thing that you have to know is like, who are you trying to serve? What is your audience? Who are they? If they're going to be listening to your podcast, you want to make your content for them. You have to think about that. Are they under 20, between 20 and 30, over 30? Are they just starting out? Are they already successful? The more specific you can get, the better. And I'm going to share why in just a little bit. So I thought about mine, and mine was, I want to serve entrepreneurs. Now, I went broad. I don't recommend that, but I went broad. I wanted to serve all entrepreneurs in every step of their journey on their way to success. Now, as I'll share a little bit later, the more specific you are, the faster you can make money with a podcast. The more broad or vague, the longer it takes. It's not to say you can't do it, but it just takes a lot longer to start earning income with your podcast. So I thought about my audience, and then I got my podcast art. I just went to Fiverr, or, you can go to Upwork, and there's tons of brilliant graphic designers that can make great podcast art for, 10, 20, 30, 50 bucks. It's not very expensive. Then I bought the equipment, and guys, I'm a big fan of being frugal. Look, Tim Ferriss, if you don't know who that is, he wrote The 4-Hour Workweek, The 4-Hour Body, Tools of Titans. He wrote Tribe of Men, best-selling author, and he has one of the most successful podcasts in the world, almost 500 million downloads. And his whole setup is like 150 bucks. And I actually copied his setup. This right here, if you're watching the video of this podcast, this mic was about 50 bucks. This little boom arm right here was about 30 bucks. I have a little ring light right here, which was $20 at Best Buy. And I have a couple of cords, and I use my Mac laptop, and that's it, guys. Like, I don't have an expensive setup. My entire setup is around 120 bucks, and I'm 50 episodes in, and I've interviewed everything from billionaires to multimillionaires to best-selling authors, and the quality and the sound is absolutely perfect. So I got my equipment. I ordered most of it from Amazon. Then I went to Audio Jungle, and I got my little beat. Whenever you listen to most podcasts, there's like your little intro, right? Like da-da-da-da-da. And you don't want to use music that is mainstream because you could get sued for copyright infringement for that. So I just went to Audio Jungle. I think I spent like $8 on a beat that I enjoy. So the beat that you listen to when you start my podcast is from Audio Jungle. And I'm actually going to change that. Then guys, look, I got on YouTube and Google and did a little bit of research, how to get it set up, and, how to publish my first episodes and get it published on like Apple and Google and Spotify. And we were off to the races, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget. My first episode was me just talking about my origin story. But my second episode, I was a really successful guy. And I'll get into the benefits in just a second. But I reached out to a gentleman. His name was Chris Cavallini, and he owns a company called nutritionsolutions.com. And I just was fascinated by his story because I had listened to him on another podcast. And I'm going to give you a little strategy, a tip here, what I did. No joke, my first almost 20 guests of my podcast, I literally went to my favorite entrepreneurial podcast, which was Entrepreneurs on Fire, EO Fire with Johnny Lee Dumas. And I made a list of every guest he had ever had on his podcast, and I hit up every single one of them one by one by one by one by one. And that is how I got my first 20 guests. I was like, oh my God, I listened to you on Entrepreneurs on Fire. It was like the best episode ever. I was blown away by what you said. Your message would my audience would love your message. Is there any way I can get you on my podcast? And I was so shocked at how many yeses that I got. But I'll never forget that first guest. I was so nervous. I had never interviewed anybody, especially on a podcast. I was so worried about like my equipment messing up or backfiring. It's just fear, right? False evidence appearing real. And his name was Chris Cavallini, and he had an incredible story. He went to prison, in and out of prison, was dealing drugs. And then he got his start as an entrepreneur, literally buying meals from a catering company and then reselling them for like $1 more. And he was just making little dollars here. And he grew that company into one of the largest meal prep companies in the world. They do well over $10 million a year. They have all kinds of athletes. They have a huge staff. And it was just an incredible interview, but I was so nervous and he was super intense. And it was just, I was sweating in the interview. It was really crazy. I was like sweating, but I got through it. And I'll never forget just that amount of confidence that I had. I immediately got off the interview. I called my fiance, Kat, and I'm like, oh my God, I just had the best interview of my life. I cannot wait to publish this. It's going to be incredible. And that was it, guys. And every interview after, it got a little better. It got a little easier. I got a little more confident. And it's just been life-changing, guys. And so now I want to talk about the benefits of podcasting for you all. Why podcast? What's in it for you? What can the short-term and the long-term payoff be? Well, let me tell you, number one is the absolute amazing networking with influencers in your space. Whatever space your podcast is on, it is the fastest way that I know of to start networking with the top people in that space. Every guest I reached out to was cold. And I'll give this tip. For me, there's a lot of ways you can reach out to people. My top 3 that created the most success, like people responded the most and the fastest, were Instagram, their personal websites, and LinkedIn. I've tried other things, no response, YouTube channel, Facebook. By far, their website, Instagram, and then number 3 is LinkedIn. And here's the thing. I thought that maybe 1 in 10. I mean, I was reaching out to people running $100, $200, $300 million companies. My first 10, 20 guests were just really successful people, best-selling authors, really busy people. And I thought maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20 will respond. So I need to reach out to a lot of people. I was shocked, guys. 1 in 3 actually booked an episode with me. And what I didn't realize at the time that I understand now is when you reach out to somebody successful or important and you're asking them a question that could benefit them, because when I would reach out, and again, in another podcast, I'll share exactly what I say, but I would just say, hey, listen, I've been studying you. I love your content. I love what you're doing. Your message would be so powerful. My audience would love it. They would eat it up and it would really make an impact on them. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that I could get a little bit of your time and just have you on the podcast and interview you. It would mean so much, but I would promote this episode like crazy. And if you're offering anything, I'm happy to promote it. And people would respond. Best-selling authors would email me back and they'd be like, I'd love to. Their secretaries, their assistants would reach out and we would start booking podcasts. And before you knew it, I had a podcast like every other day. I was recording a new episode. And so number one, guys, is just amazing networking. Some of the most notable people that I had on my podcast, I had, Chris Cavallini on nutritionsolutions.com, or Aaron Hind. Aaron Hind created Life Aid. It is a beverage company that literally is on pace to overtake Red Bull. They do over $100 million in sales. They're gobbling up companies. It's a healthy energy drink. And it was one of the best episodes. Or JT McCormick. This guy grew up in the slums, was molested as a child. Now he's the CEO of Scribe Media, which is the largest company in the world. Like if you want to write a book, They will do all of it for you. They'll interview you, write the book, and they've helped so many people write best-selling books like David Coggins, Can't Hurt Me, or Can't Hurt Me, yeah. He went through Scribe Media, so I interviewed the CEO of that. Or Laura Sandifer, who created a preschool that caters to young kids, teaching them how to be entrepreneurs and life skills. Now she has hundreds of preschools all over the country, multi-million dollar business. I've interviewed world travelers. I've interviewed CEOs, best-selling authors. I mean, people that have done the most amazing things, guys. And I stay in touch with these people. And I'll never forget the most powerful episode that I ever recorded, which is Erica Rich, 25 years old. Doctor gave her 2 years to live with stage 4 cancer. That interview was one of the most meaningful and impactful interviews that I've ever sat through. To sit down with someone so young and interview them and get to see their perspective on life, knowing that everyone around them, all of the experts, don't give them more than 2 years to live, to see how they look at the world, how they act, what they think about, how they just envision. It was incredible, guys. All of that came from launching a podcast. Second benefit, besides networking, is if you commit, I promise you, your confidence, your confidence will go through the roof and you will start to find your voice. Now, you may already have it, but I'm telling you, if you don't, if you lack confidence, you will be so shocked at how fast your confidence grows once you start doing podcasting and you start interviewing and talking and networking with really high level people. It's like a thermostat. If you're at 45 and you're always talking to people that are at 85, your temperature is going to go up. And it's just the way that it is, guys. Your confidence will go through the roof. I promise you. Number 3, you will grow your own audience. You will grow your own influence. I don't know a feeling that is more powerful and gratifying than growing your influence, knowing that your message, what you are talking about, is adding value to other people's lives. Tony Robbins says it best, right? He says the 2 things that create fulfillment in life are growth and contribution. When you are growing as a person and you're contributing to people, that is the ultimate fulfillment. And I'm telling you, once you start podcasting, you'll start to grow your own audience of people that look up to you and reach out to you and ask advice from you. And you'll start to build your own influence, which is a very, very powerful thing. Number 4, you can quickly become an expert in your niche or space by learning directly from the best in the world via interview. I don't know a faster way to become an expert than constantly talking and researching world-class guests that are at the top of their game in whatever niche that you're interviewing them in. It's a very, very fast way to just literally get your knowledge way up there. Number 5, podcasting itself in and of itself is an extremely valuable skill. Don't forget this, guys. Look, it's like running a media company, and you learn so much about the process for creating and producing content that adds value to people, either through education or entertainment. You can go 2 ways when you're going podcast. Most of them do both, but you can focus on education or entertainment, but you learn so much. And I personally know people that are making 6 and 7 figures a year just helping other people start and run their podcasts. They just coach and they teach other people how to get a podcast started, and they make 6 figures or 7 figures. So the skill of podcasting is very valuable and it's in demand. So many people want to start a podcast and they don't even know how, and they're piecing all this information. I mean, I know when I started, I was on YouTube. I was watching all of these videos and I was more confused than anything. It wasn't until I spoke with someone that actually had a podcast that I learned the steps, and it helped me. It saved me so much time. So it's a powerful skill. And number 6 is it's an amazing creative outlet. Guys, look, there's just something about getting to design, build, and grow something that is 100% your creation. And I think the fulfillment when you get to do something like that is unbelievable. It's like having a child, right? Like, for those of you that are listening that you have a child, it's like you just don't even believe it, right? Because you created something. You're responsible for growing it and building it and nurturing it. And it's such a creative outlet. And I see so many people that need a creative outlet. It's like every day they get up and they have these routines and they work hard and they just suppress that creativity that's inside them, and they suppress it for so long that they don't even believe they have it. I've been there, guys. I'm telling you, I am a very creative person, but when you just get caught up in the grind every single day, sometimes you forget that you have that you have creativity. Podcasting will bring creativity out of you. It's your baby. You get to build it, grow it, nurture it, make pivots, iterate, fix things, see what works, what doesn't work. But at the end of the day, it's just such a great feeling. I wonder if I've convinced any of you to start a podcast by now, but we're almost done with the episode. And then number 7, the final benefit that I thought of is just you can make money. You can make money podcasting. Some of you can make money right out of the gate. Some of you, it may take a little bit of time. And a lot of people ask me this. I just wanted to cover it on this episode. People always ask, well, how do you make money podcasting? Well, there's 4 main ways that you will make money podcasting. Number 1, and the first way that most people make money is just affiliate offers. You know, you don't have your own product or anything that you're selling yet, but maybe you're interviewing people that do. You can promote their stuff and you could get paid a commission anytime one of your listeners buys something that they offer. Lots of people do this, guys. Lots and lots and lots of people. And every company, every entrepreneur these days have some sort of affiliate program. It's like the fastest way and the best way to get customers. So any entrepreneur would be crazy not to have an affiliate program. Amazon, Walmart, everybody has affiliate programs at this point. And so, you know, the great thing is if you don't have your own product, it's okay. If you start building up your audience, start interviewing people that they have their own product, and you could start just really promoting their stuff, and you get paid a percentage every time somebody buys something. So it's really powerful. Second way you can make money is Patreon. A lot of people do this. Let's say that you have a really core group of followers, or you're starting to build your audience, and you just have people that they like your stuff. You know, Patreon is a way for people to support you by making donations one time every single month. But in exchange, what you do is you give something away, right? Like you give them like behind the scenes stuff. You give them gear. You give them exclusive content that you don't give everybody. You want to create some kind of perk or benefit, but like I know people literally that make millions of dollars on Patreon alone. They have 20, 30, 50,000 listeners, and they have created all kinds of cool behind the scenes, bloopers, gags, gear, shirts, all kinds of things for their Patreon. And they create like levels, right? Like $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, all the way up to like $100 a month. And you get to have a 30-minute conversation with the host once a month. And they make millions of dollars through Patreon. And Patreon is a way for people to support you, to donate. People that love your stuff, they can donate as little or as much as they want. Number 3, sponsorships. This usually takes time. Now, this is again, the more niche you are, the faster you can make money through sponsorships, because you can be laser targeted, right? Like the more niche you are, the less of an audience that you need before you can start making money. If you're super niche, like I have a friend here in Nashville, and his podcast is about finance only in Nashville when it comes to buying and selling a home. It's very specific, and he doesn't have a lot of listeners. He has a handful of listeners, maybe a couple hundred listeners at most per episode. But because he's so niche, and because he knows that the people listening to that episode are people wanting to buy or sell a house in Nashville, he's able to target real estate agents, and they pay him to be a sponsor on the show. So he makes a couple, $2,000, $3,000 per month with only an audience of like 200 people per episode. So just remember, the more broad you are, the longer it will take to make money through sponsorships. Me, if I could go back in time, see, when I started my podcast, I was not trying to make money. I wanted to just network, build a community, build my influence, and I thought it would be really fun. But if I could go back in time and I wanted to make money, I would be way more laser focused on creating a niche, and I would have been able to monetize way, way, way before now. Now, the fourth and final way to monetize is the longest one, which is if you create your own products. You know, over time, you're going to build an audience. And your audience, they're going to reach out to you, connect with you. They're going to either want more of your stuff, or you're going to get ideas of things that you can create that can serve your community, and you can sell those things and you can start earning money. Everything from courses to products. One of my favorite podcasts is Real AF with Andy Frisella. And I mean, he has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of listeners, but he owns First Form Supplements. And like 95% of his customers come from the listeners of his podcast, and it's over $100 million a year business. First Form Supplements, crazy. Andy Frisella's podcast, phenomenal podcast. So those are the 4 ways that you can make money. Now, the last 2 things I want to cover, number 1 is the skills that you will learn. And I'll cover this one very quickly because you will learn some very, very, very powerful skills running a podcast. Don't forget how Oprah became a billionaire, guys. Oprah became great at interviewing other people, important people. She mastered the art of interviewing others. And through that, she built her own influence into one of the most influential women on the planet today. And she started just a different form of media. It wasn't podcasting. She was doing it on television. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of skills that you'll learn running a podcast. Number 1, how to think quickly and improvise. That is a very powerful skill. It's one of those things where it's like sales, right? If you don't use it, you'll lose it. And if you're not doing something that keeps you sharp and keeps you witty and quick and having to think quick on your feet, you literally can get complacent. And so, there's tons of studies out there that show that Alzheimer's, one of the big factors of Alzheimer's is just not using your mind. That people that are older, that are doing crossword puzzles all the time, that are thinking, that are still working, having to be challenged, they're at a much lower risk of developing Alzheimer's than people that aren't really thinking. So one of the biggest skills that you'll learn running a podcast is how to think quickly and improvise. Guys, I'm doing this podcast right here. My notes are right next to me. And a year ago, I would not be able to do this. Like, I would not be able to talk to you, having a full-blown conversation and just glancing at my notes for like 1 second and then glancing back at you. It would have been impossible. But over time, you just start to develop that muscle and develop that skill. The second skill is just how to do an interview. It's so powerful. My first few interviews were so bad. I would ask really stupid questions. I didn't even publish some of my interviews because they were so terrible. I got off the interview and I'm like, oh my God, I freaking sucked ass at this interview. I asked the dumbest questions. I got blank looks and stares, just crazy. So, but you get better and you learn how to interview. Next is how to create better and better content. Once you start to realize which episodes get the most listens and what your audience likes and doesn't like, you can start to create better and better content, which literally puts you on a trajectory of rapid growth. And the last thing is just how to test ideas and find the best way to serve your audience. All right, so that's some of the skills. The final thing that I want to share with you on podcasting is the advice that I would give you if you decide to start one. And this is really important. I'm going to share a few things and we're going to wrap up. And I hope that there's some value that all of you got out of this podcast so far. But the first thing I would tell you if you wanted to start a podcast before anything else is think about an intersection between these 2 things. You want to think about a cross between something that you love and you are passionate about and something that can really help the people that you want to serve. That's a cross. It's what you love and what the market wants. You want to create something that is somewhere along those lines, because there's nothing worse than interviewing people like thinking like, well, what do people like? They like pets. So I'm just going to start a podcast, because it's a journey, guys. There's a commitment to podcasting. So to talk about something that you don't like or have no passion for, it makes zero sense. But you might like something that nobody else gives a shit about. And you don't want to really do that either. You want to find an intersection, right? You want to find a mix between what you love and love to talk about and what there could be an interest for people. Now, the second thing, think about the direction that you want to take. Are you focused more on entertainment or education, right? Like Ed Milet. Now, all podcasts, you're going to do both. You're going to entertain and educate, because if you don't, you won't have an audience. But you need to think about your focus. Like Ed Milet or like let me think of some other education, or the School of Greatness. Those are entrepreneurial podcasts. You leave feeling super inspired, and they've built audiences of millions of listeners. But on the flip side, entertainment, to me, you can grow faster audience that way, even though it might not be your passion. You might not want to go that route. But man, like those true crime podcasts, oh my God. Like they have millions and millions and millions of listeners. I read this thing. It was actually a friend of mine. One of my good friends, his neighbor started a podcast, and it was a true crime podcast. There was like some unsolved murder in Oregon, and he was really interested. It was all on the news, and it kind of went quiet. They never found like the killer, and it just kind of went cold. And so like 10 years later, he's like, you know what? I'm going to create a podcast, 12 episodes, and I'm going to focus it all on this like one murder. And so he went out and he started interviewing like everybody, the police station, anybody, like family, all that stuff. And in 10 episodes, like 10 episodes, I'm 50 episodes in almost. He went from just starting out to 1 million listeners in 10 episodes. Why? Because people love that stuff. True crime, people love it. Unsolved mysteries, people love that stuff. So you need to think about, are you going to focus your podcast more on entertainment or education? So the intersection between what you love, what will serve an audience, education, entertainment. I've already kind of covered this, but just remember this, guys, especially if you want to make money. If your goal is to make money with a podcast, the more niche, the better. The more specific, the better. Guys, if I could go back in time, this would be the biggest advice that I would give myself. Go more niche, not broad. Oh, I want to serve people. No. I want to serve women. No. I want to serve women who like, you need to narrow it down and get more and more and more and more niche. I'm telling you this, and I'm harping on this because this by far guaranteed will be your biggest challenge in starting a podcast. You will think you're niche, but you are not niche. You need to niche down, niche down, niche down. And just, I mean, here's the thing, guys. Like one of the things that's crazy that just really, really great advice is just find a podcast that you like and just see how you can maybe put a little bit of a spin on it. You know, it's easier to do that than try to like think of something that's never been done before. You know, find something that you love, a podcast that already has a listener base. That means there's interest, right? And try to figure out how you can make it a little bit different so maybe you can get some of their listeners rather than racking your brain all day thinking about, well, what has not ever been done before? Guys, look, you're going to be thinking for years if you're trying to figure out something that has never been done before. All right, next. I would encourage you, and you don't have to take this advice, but I would start with audio only, but think about going to video as fast as possible because it takes the same amount of effort, and video is king right now. Video content is king, especially on social media, YouTube, Facebook. I mean, video is king. It has been for a little while, and it will be for a very, very, very long time. My first probably 35 episodes were just audio. I was nervous. I didn't want to look at their face because I thought it would throw me off. But man, like video is just as easy. Once I did my first few, I was addicted to it. And it was the same content, right? Like now I'll record an episode on Zoom, and then I'll send it off. I have a virtual assistant that lives in the Philippines, and he takes that video, and then he takes the audio, and he takes the video, publishes the video to YouTube, publishes the audio, and it goes out to all of the platforms. And it's the same amount of work, but now I have video and audio, and that allowed me to start a YouTube channel just using the same amount of time that I was using already. But I'd really think about going video as fast as possible, and it's just trust me on that. Next, more expensive isn't better. Guys, listen, be as frugal as possible with your podcast when it comes to your equipment, design, editing. Tim Ferriss, 500 million downloads. His whole setup was less than a couple $100, and he just uses his laptop. Do not think content is king, not equipment. Do not think because you have the best of the best, everything like this mic is $50 and it works just fine. Okay. Be frugal. Next thing, advice I would give you, you can outsource all of the editing and production for pretty cheap. Mine personally is $25 an episode. I literally get on Zoom. I record my episode and on my mic, and then it saves an audio and a video file automatically. Zoom does this. I forward that file to a guy in the Philippines, which again, if you have questions, I'm happy to share with you where I found my guy. He might even be available to help you as well, but it's $25 per episode. So it's very inexpensive. Yes, it's an investment, but guys, look, anything is, especially if you want to grow podcasting into a media empire or build a business out of it. And like, you can easily get to making money and make more than you're spending. Okay. So be frugal, outsource all of the editing production. You could do it for really cheap, or you can learn it yourself, which is a whole other skill. And you can become valuable to be really valuable to other podcasters. Next, listen more than you talk. This is not just to the people that you're interviewing. When I say listen more than you talk, listen to your audience. Listen to who your listeners are. Get feedback. Find out what they want to learn. Find out what their problems are. Find out what they're interested in. Okay, and get guests that can help them solve their problems with their experience or their wisdom. Okay, it's guys, the best way, I can't tell you how many billionaire entrepreneurs say this. You build something simple, and then you get feedback, and then you build your product based on that feedback. Why? Because you're not creating a podcast for you. You're creating a podcast to serve other people. And the best way to serve other people is to ask questions and get feedback. Okay, so make sure that you listen more than you talk. Next, be patient, be consistent. Do not wrap your emotions in the number of listeners that you have right out of the gate. Guys, look, these things take time. You have to be patient. Do not give up after 5, 10, 15 episodes. Stick with it. I promise you, it will pay off. I have people reaching out to me all the time to be guests on my podcast. I'll never forget the first time somebody reached out to me finally. I was like, oh my God, yes. Now I have every week people reach out to me. It wasn't like that my first 6, 7 months of running the podcast. I had to reach out to everybody, and most of them were cold, and I had to network and do some digging. Now, finally, my last piece of advice. Stop trying to be perfect. Just do it. I personally believe that more great ideas in this world never come to fruition because of this than anything else in the world. Just take action and you will make improvements along the way. You don't need to figure it all out before you start. Guys, listen, if you're driving on a road trip 2,000 miles, imagine how difficult it would be if you did not want to leave your house until all of the lights were green from between you and the destination. It's not going to happen. You just have to go and you pivot, you make turns and improvements along the way. Just do it. Don't be afraid to mess up. And I promise you, it'll happen for you. And so I just wanted to share this podcast because, I'm 38 now. It's been a year. This by far was probably the smartest thing that I've done, except asking my girlfriend to marry me. But this is probably the smartest thing that I've done in the last 12 months as an entrepreneur, and I highly encourage all of you to do it. And as always, if you have questions, reach out to me on Instagram. Just follow me on Mentor Nation Podcast, at Mentor Nation Podcast. I'll reach out, respond, and I'll help any way that I can. I mean, if you have a question, I'll be glad to answer it. If I get busy, it might take a few days to answer it, but just understand that I want to serve you guys. And I just wanted to have this episode because I think a lot of you guys that are listening, you want to do something, you have creativity, you have a message that you want to say, or you want to interview people in a space, you want to know how to build your network or change your circle of people that you're spending time with. Podcasting by far is the fastest way to do it. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you next week with an actual guest. And man, the next 4 or 5 guests are going to blow your mind. Thanks for listening. Take care and have a great week.